Good day, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Shadowmatch System Navigation and Support webinar. It's great to have you with us. As you know, this webinar is especially for you, for our system users. So we always have different topics and different content. Today, we'll be focusing on a few interesting things I'll show you in just a moment. Just the general admin arrangement, as always. The first part, your setting is that you are muted just to allow me to present the content that we've prepared. But at the end of the session, we will have a live question and answer section if there's anything you would like to ask. In the meanwhile, please feel free to use the chat. If there's something you want to ask about the topic or something else, then we can address it in the chat or then address it live at the end. So thanks for joining in. And as you know, the recording will also be made available after the session on your events tab on the calendar. You will be able to access it again. So if there's something you want to refer back to, no, you will have access to the recording. You don't have to make notes profusely. But yeah, let's jump in and take a look at what we will be discussing today. Great. Okay, so the first section, which would actually be the main focus of today, is how Shadowmatch enhances your interview process. So specifically focusing in on interviewing, not necessarily the full optimal placement, everything from start to finish, focusing on that aspect. So a few things we'll be talking about and a few things I'm going to show you live on the system. And then we're going to focus on a few quick tips. So you'll see it's jumping across different functionalities on the system. We'll be looking at including and excluding individual results in a team, how you can easily use all your data together in a team profile, how to create an anonymous team, then using filters across multiple products. So if you may be using Shadowmatch and SkillsGrid or Shadowmatch and Stress Mapper, for instance. And then lastly, just a quick review of your results options. So when you're working with individual results, which graphs can you work with? So yeah, so that's the content of today. Let's jump into that first topic and maybe just to show you where you can find more detail. As I said, we will be focusing in on the interview process specifically. If you're curious about optimal placement in a holistic approach, remember when you log into the system, your first screen, your info center or your welcome page would give you the various applications of the system. And you'll see this one called optimal placement, which gives you a wider overview of how everything is integrated into this aspect of using the system. I'm now live on the system. You have access to this. So there's a nice short how it works video and then a system navigation video exploring more of the aspects. Today, we're talking about the interview process. Now, important to remember at the start is also the rules of the game. What I mean by this is when using interviews in an organization, you have to go through the same process, the same procedure for all of your candidates. So you can't, for the one candidate, do A, B, and C, and for the next do A, B, and W. You have to do the same process. And obviously, all of the candidates, you can't just use one assessment, one test, one thing to make your purely base your decision on that. It's a whole process of things that you implement together that helps you to determine which candidate will be the optimal candidate for that position. So Shadowmatch respects and adheres to these rules to say it needs to be practically implementable in what you're doing in real life practice in an organization. So you'll see what is our best practice guidelines of where do you put this in your interview process that helps you to really get the full value out of this. But remember what we're recommending you would then do with all of your candidates to make that process fair and effective. Now, the overarching description of Shadowmatch is a workforce optimization system. So in its essence, it is how to help you optimize the processes. What we mean by that is work effectively with your resources, work effectively with your monetary resources, with your time resources, with your actual individuals in the organization. And you'll see how implementing or utilizing the Shadowmatch functionalities really does that, to say we optimally using our time, we're optimally valuing individuals, we're optimally valuing the organization by just implementing the Shadowmatch functionalities effectively in our process. Because let's just sketch two scenarios. Scenario one, you're doing interviewing individuals applying for your organization without Shadowmatch. you use all of your processes that you follow, the interviewing process, everything you might have checked, the CVs, all of that. But the process isn't necessarily informed by something that makes you sure this is going to be a sustainable fit in your unique organization. By including Shadowmatch in the process, what are you including? What are you unlocking to help optimize that process? You firstly have access to the individual's unique way of doing things. So you have insight into how is this individual going to operate, going to do things in their day-to-day engagement in our environment. How are they actually going to do this? So you get that future glance to see, okay, what is going to happen? What is this individual going to do and operate every day? What can I expect? How frequently am I going to see which behavior? What are the things this individual is going to call on to do what we're going to expect of them? And this is all I'm referring to is one thing is the Shadowmatch result. The map of the individual, where you have that unique map of what is this individual's unique approach to the environment, the unique habits, the behavioral patterns. So firstly, you have that to say, I really understand the potential candidate and what I can expect of them, how they're going to operate. By linking that to the other functionalities, you're taking that to the next level. Now you're making sure, listen, I want to really get value out of this data. I don't just want to know about the candidate in isolation. I want to understand how this candidate or individual will fit into my unique organization. So what is the actual sustainability of this fit? I understand the individual, but now I want to understand my organization. So the two things you use in this, as you all know, and this is not the purpose of today's discussion, but just for our foundation, is the benchmarking you would use in your roles to say, but let's understand which of the habits are functional towards success in a specific role. So benchmark, what you do in that aspect is you identify the top performers in that specific role, the real life performing individuals doing the job day to day, and you combine their Shadowmatch result to give you that benchmark or that context map. Now you can understand, but in our organization, in this role, which habits are most frequently used, which habits actually do the job, which habits actually give us performance. So now you understand the context. Let's say it's not in a specific role where you can create benchmarks. Let's say it's in an individual role, just one individual joining a team, each doing their own section. Then you can still see how will this individual operate in your context. In this format, you would then use the team context to say, I have 5 team members currently. Let's bring in team member number 6. And now you can see what is the real life dynamics that are going to play out between the team members and the potential candidates. So in short, what you're doing is you're enhancing the process with data. And the nice thing you all as Shadowmatch users that you know is the data that you're integrating into this is sustainable data. It's patterns. It's not something that's fleeting or on the day of the individual felt like this, or on this specific, in this specific scenario, the individual felt like this. It's the sustainable patterns, the patterns that we know the individual is going to fall back onto to use everything that they need to do in your environment. So there's that nice sustainability in the fit to say, listen, am I seeing the future in this? Will this be a fit for the individual and the organization? And then the last thing just to mention is what you're also unlocking when you utilize Shadowmatch in this process, the interview pack, is you then inform the actual questions that you use in the interview process with data to say, let's not use vague questions that might not really give us valuable information, something vague like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, or tell me something about yourself. And then the candidate gets out that prepared answer that they've been doing for the last 5 years in every interview, and it really doesn't mean anything of value to you. What happens in the interview pack is it really informs even that specific aspect of it to say, let's focus in on which questions and which things would be applicable for this specific role. So yeah, I know that's quite a lengthy introduction, but that's the value of utilizing Shadowmatch in that process and not. So if everything I've just mentioned, you take all that value out if you don't do Shadowmatch, then it's just the standard process that you use to say, okay, interviews and. But by incorporating Shadowmatch, you enhance each of these functions in the process with data, with insight, and with sustainable data. Now, also just important before we get to the system to mention is a very a common question that we have is, when is the right time to send out Shadowmatch worksheets for candidates or applicants, individuals applying to your organization? Because what very often happens is companies or organizations, they want to keep back a bit on the worksheet to say, we want to save a bit of money here and then maybe do it later on in the process. But what's happening is you're actually not getting the full value. You're actually not fully optimizing the process. I'm going to share a quick case study with you just to illustrate my example. This was now one of our clients, one of our head office clients. And what happened is they went through a quite intensive bout of interviews. So 2 weeks, they had interviews day in and day out with various candidates. Went through the rigorous process. It was the MD that was actually administering the candidates. The MD phoned up the consultant after all of this, because what happened is after all of those interviews, they then decided on 3 potential individuals that they liked the most. So the top 3 individuals in the process. They then sent those 3 individuals the Shadowmatch worksheet. They did the worksheet, they bashed it against the benchmark, and none of the individuals matched the benchmark, meaning there wasn't a sustainability in the unique way of the individual's behavior and what is going to be expected of them in the actual role. So now they were a bit defeated to say, but what now? What can we do? We can't appoint these individuals knowing this, because we know it's not going to work, but we already went through all of this, the rigor role. So the Shadowmatch consultant then asked the MD, but why did you do it this way? Why did you only send worksheet invites to 3 individuals? And why did you spend 2 weeks in and out to interviews? You could have used your time so much better. And then they said, but listen, but we wanted to save money. And then we understood what happened there. And if you listen carefully to what they did, is take the time or calculate what it would cost the MD if the hourly rate for 2 weeks to be in interviews day in and day out. They never made that calculation to say, okay, we're actually allocating this resource only to this. Nothing else happens. Everything else stands still. So we only did interviews. So we didn't make that calculation. We maybe saved a few $100, a few $100 on the worksheets, but we never made that calculation. So all that we suggested, and that's the best practice, is send the worksheets to your shortlist. So the moment you've went through all the CVs, you've checked the minimum requirements. Do they have the experience or the qualifications, all of the checks and things you want to have in place for that role? The moment you have that group of CVs, the candidates who say, yes, they have everything that they need to be trained on, awesome, those individuals, send the worksheet invites to all of those candidates. Because what then happens is you get the data, and now you can use the system to optimize. And that's what I'm going to show you now, is how you can then effectively work through that list. And then the number of individuals that you interview is so much less, because now it's the individuals that match your specific environment. So you know it's the individuals that has a sustainable future in your organization. And then you do the interviews as you've always done. You do the interviews, but now you maybe interview 3 individuals instead of 23 individuals. So it's a more effective, optimized version of that. And now the nice thing is the individuals that you're interviewing, you know they will fit this role. You know there is a chance for them to be successful in this role. So now you can check the other things you wanted to check in the interview, but you know it's, yes, there is a future for this individual. So great. Let's see if it's a fit for the individual as well. So yeah, just a real life case study. What we then suggested is go back to all of the CVs, send out Shadowmatch worksheet individuals to all of those individuals that made the shortlist requirements. They did that. They got great matches, and then they interviewed those individuals as well. And then from the bigger pool, they then made the appointment, because now they knew it was a sustainable fit. And the good news is now they're using that process. So every interview they do now is optimized to say we're working effectively with our time and our money and our resource, as that to say we're spending money wisely. We're spending it where we know we're getting actual value from this. Because the joke of the matter is, you maybe want to save a few $100 on the worksheet invites, or a few dollars, but you're ready to pay the salary of that individual every month. And you know that's the biggest cost to the company, is the salary account. So you're willing to say, yes, I'm going to incur this, this big thing that I need to pay every month for this individual, but I'm not sure if it's really the right individual. So yeah, so that's just a quick live case study. And then just the last thing why we also recommend doing the Shadowmatch worksheet before the interview is because we're human. As much as we want to say, listen, we have all of these processes and things that we put in place to make sure it's a fair process and all of this, is we are still human. So we are still influenced by subtle things like micro expressions and cues that you pick up from individuals. So the fact that I look like the bully in your high school might influence you in the interview, or the fact that I look like your favorite niece might influence the interview process. So by incorporating Shadowmatch in that process, listen, I'm vetting this with data to say, is this sustainability, or am I just liking a candidate? Because another thing with interviews is the moment I'm charismatic, the moment I have people skills, the moment I have better people habits, I'm going to convince you. In the interview, you're testing me to see, can I convince you that I can get this job? So I'm convincing you, say, yeah, give me a chance. Give me a chance. I'm going to be the best whatever in your organization that you've ever seen. So the style of my interview based on something like how charismatic I am or my people skills is convincing you that I'm going to do the job. And now you appoint me in the job. And then 2 weeks later, I can't do what you expect of me. I can't do the report. I can't do the whatever you wanted me to do because there wasn't necessarily a sustainable fit. Now, by introducing Shadowmatch, you cater for that to say, listen, it's not just the interview that someone is going to convince me in it. I'm sure that this is a long-term sustainable fit. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the system. Now, it's actually very quick and very easy, the steps, because you're all familiar with these functionalities, but let's just make sure you know where to go. So back on the system, going to the system. So the things that need to be in place is you need to have the file that you want to send the results out of. So in this scenario, we're recruiting for customer support. And bonus if there is a benchmark. So if you have the benchmark, then obviously you can then incorporate this data. If there isn't a benchmark for the role, we'll take a look at the team in just a moment. But if there's a benchmark, all that needed to happen is the individuals that are currently performing in the role, they needed to individually complete the Shadowmatch benchmark of the Shadowmatch worksheet. The data is pulled into the benchmark and you have your benchmark in place. All of the candidates, everybody you're considering for this role, everybody that meets your short list requirements, you send them the Shadowmatch worksheet invite. They complete the Shadowmatch worksheet on their time. It takes about 40 minutes on average to complete. And I look how effectively I'm working with my time. I click this one button. And now from my full list of these are the shortlisted individuals that have individually completed the worksheet. So everybody on the screen, I know they will be able to do the job based on their CV. So these CVs all look the same. Great. Individuals that I can appoint tomorrow because their CV says, yes, they will be able to do the role in my organization. But now I just click that one button to say, but tell me behaviorally, tell me if the way they operate, the way that they engage the environment, if it's going to work in my unique organization or not. So do you see what it did? It ranked it from the closest alignment to the softer alignment. So now in my interview process, I would then invite the following individuals, my top candidates there. I would only interview those individuals because now I know there's a sustainability in the fit. Let's just quickly take a visual view of this. Now you're all familiar with the results, but just that you can see what I'm meaning when I say this. The gray is the context. So that is the map of the intensities of the habits that work in this environment, meaning the successful individuals in this role. They inform that to say, what is the focus on ownership, on team inclinations versus individual inclination, all of the aspects, which of the habits are used most frequently. So we have that gray graph, we have that context map. The purple, the maroon, the red, that is then this individual's unique way of doing things, the patterns in a behavior that she or he is going to fall back onto. And now we get that future glance to say, okay, but is this going to work? Yes or no? And the system helps you and informs you to say, listen, do you see the chances of this individual also becoming a top performer is very, very high because there is that sustainability and the fit in this fit. And then just maybe the last thing to mention on this topic or on this aspect here is what you're also seeing is the individual's behaviors always, not just in the 30-minute interview. Because in the 30-minute interview, I can promise you the moon and the stars, or I can be friendly, or I can be whatever I want to be in that interview. But This is what is going to happen 2 weeks from now, what is going to happen 2 months from now, what's going to happen 2 years from now in my behavior. You can see those patterns that I'm going to fall back onto after the interview, after the first 2 weeks when I was excited for the job, after the probation period when I no longer feel that you're breathing down my neck. These are the patterns that are actually gonna manifest. And now you can see, yes, will it work, yes or no? So obviously, as you know, there's the matching report that explains everything you saw there visually, that helps you to make this decision to say, what does it mean that it is a 10 out of 10 match or a 7 out of 10 match? So great reports that help you to inform this process. What you can then do is for each of the candidates that you then want to interview, meaning you want to invite them to come for an interview, you can request an interview pack to say, let's see how this individual is in real life or in person, and you can then optimize the process by including the interview pack. I'm scrolling down, clicking on this button here, and now the system would explain to me what it is. If you've never requested an interview pack before, you've never worked on it, I'm going to urge you to do this and click on the tell me more button. There's a very nice video that explains that, how to request it, everything about it. So that's the complete how to click and where to click if you want to see that. But in essence, what an interview pack is it generates a list of 10 questions that focuses on the behaviors that are critical for that job. So the benchmark, understanding what is the nuances and the complexities of behaviors required for success in this role. Why is it linked to the benchmark and not to the specific candidate? Jump back to the start of our session today, is because everybody needs to go through the same process in my interview process. I cannot give easy questions to candidate A because she has these habits, and harder questions to candidate B because she has those habits. The questions are informed by what is the context, what is all of these candidates going to be expected of doing in our organization. What's the beauty of those questions is they focused on actual things that are critical in that environment. So maybe there's a balance between working as a team or working as individuals in that organization. Those questions would zone in on that to say, but ask the individual, what would they do in this scenario? What can you expect in this case? And the good thing is it's not a leading question where there's an obvious right answer to say, oh, I obviously have to say this is a strength or this is A, B, and C. It's their preference. It's their preference on what they're going to do. And the nice thing is you're obviously backing this with data because you do have access to their Shadowmatch results. So you can also see, is this individual being honest with you to say, yes, you know what? I love working on my own. I'm effective if I fly solo, and you can see there's a strong individual inclination habit or whatever the scenario might be. Now, the interview process, if you do everything, you can link that to a panel where the full panel would receive the full interview pack. You can request it for each candidate. You can schedule it for that date. That's what that little video shows you, to say everything from start to finish, where the interview is. Everyone receives it via email. You can at the end capture the scores. So a full comprehensive functionality here to help you optimize the interviewing process by using the interview pack. If this is too much focus on behavioral questions, then you can always request the interview pack, choose some of the questions that will be part of all of the interviews for the candidates, and say, behaviorally, we know these questions are critical, and you make it part of the manual interview process that you do, but you know it's informed by data based on the picture. Okay, so that's actually how quick and easy it is to just enhance that interview process. All that needs to happen is the individuals need to complete the Shadowmatch worksheet, and that benchmark is in place, and then you request the interview pack. If you don't have the benchmark route, then you can use the Shadowmatch result of the individual and then use the team report to enhance that to see, okay, in the specific team, what can we expect if you're considering bringing candidates into this? Okay, I think that's actually all I wanted to chat about on the interview process. Let's just sum that up to say, remember that by including that, you have the data to see, okay, what is the sustainable long-term fit of this individual, and not just in the 30 minutes or the 45 minutes we get to see them, because you have access to the unique habits. So you're optimizing or enhancing that process by including the data in it. Now, our next topic that we're focusing on is just those quick and easy tips on the system. The first option, or the first one we're focusing on, is how are we including and excluding individual results in a team? So now we're shifting our head, we're moving to a different function on the system. when you're working with the team profile, and it maybe can link to our previous topic, is if you want to see what a team would look like with various individuals in it. Something like recruitment, where you say, okay, the following 3 individuals are my candidates that I'm considering, and I want to see what they look like in the team profile. The best route is to create one big team with all of the data and then to work clever with the data in your team profile. What do I mean by this? When I go to my Shadowmatch teams, I can link any results in a team format. I can grab any individuals from the system and say include in a team. On the team profile like this, I can see this visually where the following individuals within, I can see the team profile for those individuals that are included. But if I now don't go the best practice route, I might be tempted to say, okay, I have to create 5 different teams. The core team, so my sales team and Lizette, sales team and Suzanne, sales team and John, sales team and whoever. Now what I'm doing is 5 times I have to go and select data, say create a team and add it on the system. Select data, and so I'm not working effectively with my time and the data on the system. So what is the best practice is I grab all of the individuals that I am considering or want to see the data collected with. And now I can simply use this function here. I'm just grabbing 3 individuals as an example. And this button is the one we're focusing on today. The moment I select individuals, I have the option to obviously remove them from the result if it's not needed. But this one here, exclude from the team calculation. So what then happens is that data is just on standby. So if I just scroll down, you see it opens up this section to say individuals on standby. So this means it's close by. Now, let's go back to our little scenario here. Let's say, for argument's sake, this is my core team. These are all of the individuals that are actually in the team that are employed in our organization. These 3 individuals are potential candidates I am considering. So now I can see, okay, firstly, what is the team profile of my actual employees working there? What does it look like? Great, I see the distribution. I can maybe go and see who's in which sub area, all of this. So I have the data of understanding the actual team without a candidate. Now I simply go grab one of the individuals, let's say Gary. I select that, and now I say, please put it back. So please add it into the calculation. Now what I'm seeing is the entire team as well as Gary. So now the data is reflecting what would happen in real life, meaning the base is there and then the potential candidate is part of that team. Now I can see, okay, great, how is the candidate's results comparing to the team? I can see in which subgroup is that individual forming. Did it change our anchor group? Did it change something in the team? Because every individual in the team, you know, has an influence on that team context. So now I can see what that's like. And I say, okay, great. Okay, Gary, thanks, Gary. We saw what we needed. I can download the report if I want to, that I have that on file, but I can take that individual again and say, okay, please put it on standby again. And now I can do the same with the next candidate and put them in. So yeah, so you get the gist of what I'm saying is by using the on standby, including and excluding option, I'm working quickly and effectively with my data. So you can then, any scenario that you want to see is to say, okay, let's put all of the staff together. Great, see what's that graph. Oh, let's quickly take out the finance department and see what then happens. How does that influence things? And we put the finance department back. And let's quickly take out the frontline team. So you can play with the data without you having to go and create 25 different teams. So you as system administrator being frustrated to say, I have to go and select create a team again and again. By using that option effectively, you cleverly work with your data. Okay, so that's, you see, it's quick and easy, these tips, but we just want to make sure you are aware of that. So that's including and excluding individual results in a team. And then the next thing I want to show you is, I don't know if you were aware, but you can actually create a team without names. For whatever reason, if you need to have access to that, to say, listen, you don't want to reflect the specific names of the individuals. Currently, you see on the screen, you can see it's Dawn and all of those team members. If you go to your list of Shadowmatch teams, you see there's a selected there that says hide team member names. Now, you might have never seen this before, but it's actually live, always there. So if you select this, all of the teams you then viewing will have the setting made live. So you just saw what the graph looked like. I now selected that, and you see what happens now is now I'm working with person 1, person 2, and person 3. So all of the personal data has been removed, exactly the same results, the same dynamics in the team, but I have the option to show this anonymous. So if that's every requirement for whatever reason that you want to play around with the data, just know that's how quick and easy it is to activate that. How do I put the names back? I simply go back, deselect, and now the names will populate in the teams again. So it's a setting that I can apply to all of the teams that I'm viewing, how to create an anonymous teams only showing person 1, person 2, instead of the actual names of the team members. Great, so that's our next little tip there. Then we're moving to using the filters. So this is something that's applicable if you're using multiple products. So in this scenario, let's say I'm a company that uses both Shadowmatch and SkillsGrid, then these buttons here would become valuable to me. So each of these are actually a filter to activate that program. So the default setting I'm logging in, if I use Shadowmatch, SkillsGrid, Shadowmatch, SkillsGrid, and StressMapper is everything is live. So the data I see here, the numbers I see here is everything integrated or everything together. I can switch around between everything. But let's say I want to focus in on a specific product, something like SkillsGrid. And I want to say, okay, I'm focusing in on SkillsGrid. I simply select the filter and now it will stay SkillsGrid focused. So what happened here is you see the results change to now I can see how many SkillsGrid results I have on the system. And if I go to the worksheet invite screen, I'm sending out a SkillsGrid worksheet as default. So it's nice, the system just follows your train of thought to say, okay, you're focusing in, you want to work with this specific product. Let's keep everything linked to that. But on every screen, you can still activate the rest. So you can still make it broader. Let's use a practical example that you can see. How do I deselect the filter? Simply do that. Now I'm back to the default setting. Let's say StressMapper, I'm zoning in. Oh, I only have 14 results here. I still need to go and invite 20 people in this department. I know there should be 34. I go in, I say send worksheet invites. Because I've selected my StressMapper filter, the system will automatically guide me in this way. It will automatically have the StressMapper worksheet selected. So great. So it's following my train of thought to say, StressMapper, you wanted to look at StressMapper, you probably want to send StressMapper worksheet. It is selected, off you go. Let's say I said, oh yeah, your StressMapper, but they also still need to do SkillsGrid. Then you simply select SkillsGrid. So any combination of things can be selected from here, but that filter just helps you to save the time to say, okay, great. You probably want to do StressMapper. Here is StressMapper, and we've activated it for you. But you see it's still customizable on every screen, that you can still have access to everything, but your filter just links it nice and concise that you're focusing in on that specific aspect. And if I deselect the filter, obviously then I go back to everything activated. Okay, so that's how quick and easy the filters are. And then the very last thing is just those result view options. Now, this isn't something that's new, but the good news is it's something that we're enhancing that's going to be available to everyone, that you can view both of the view options. Let me just first show you what I am referring to before I tell you what's coming. So if I go to any result of an individual, let's grab Tanya's result. And you can do this in the benchmark, the matched view, or if it's just the result of that individual, let's use just an individual result as an example. So what I'm currently seeing is one individual's Shadowmatch results, so their unique behavioral patterns in the bar graph. So this is probably the graph or the view you're most familiar with because it's the default graph. You know, this is nice and interactive. So if you click on something, it will give you the feedback on that specific habit. Now, what we're doing is this view here, the circle view, or the view that splits it into the specific categories. Everything task habit related linked in one quadrant. The idea habits linked there, the internal habits there, and the people habits here. The exact same results, the same thing you just saw in a bar graph, just in a different visual view. You can at any time switch like this. So do you see I switched and now I can see it, and I can switch back and I can see the bar graph again. What we're enhancing is that both of these views will be available in the report so that you can both see the bar graph as well as the circular or the wheeled graph, seeing the habits like this, because we saw some of the users prefer this to say, okay, we like it that it is focusing in on the specific type of habits together. It's also maybe just the view that they prefer to say, I like it that it's in this view. You don't have to explain to us why you prefer this view. The good news is that we're now enhancing it, that this will then be available in the download. Currently, if you would download the full report, it would default just to this graph. So you would only have access to the bar graph of the individual. And what we're now enhancing is that we're including both of those views, that you can access them both. It's still your preference, you working live on the system, which view you want to select. So you can select anyone when working with whichever result, and you saw how easy it is to switch between the different views. Great. I think that is then everything I wanted to touch on. So you saw a few nice system tips, and then obviously the main focus was just think about your interview process to make sure you're not making silly mistakes where you might be losing time or might be working ineffectively with resources. Make sure you get the full value out of it. And the take-home message is send the Shadowmatch worksheet to your shortlist, and then you know, great, you get the optimal value out of the system functionalities, and then request the reports that you would like to make the decisions on. Great, okay. Let me change the setting that you can unmute. There we go, you can unmute. And then, Lizette, any questions in the chat that we needed to address? It looks quiet, great. Okay, if there's anything live, you're welcome just to raise your hand or just start speaking, raise your virtual hand. Great, Rita, go ahead.
Actually, I have two questions. So the first question is, how would you guide a client on, for example, now the candidate who was a great fit, a 10 out of 10, but there were radical habits like for that discipline. Would that be a red flag, or would you just leave it like that? What would your guidance be there?
Okay, great. Okay, so just to summarize that, we want to help to guide an individual or organization if there is radical habits that we see on one of the candidates we're considering bringing into the organization. Now, the first thing, Rita, to remember is if you have that benchmark, you can see if the radical habits are going to be functional towards success in the environment. In other words, is this maybe a benchmark where radical habits are needed, where the benchmark individuals also showed that radical habits are used? If that's the case, fantastic, because it then means that radical habits are aligning, so the radical habits are needed to be actually successful in that role. Let's say it's a second scenario where there isn't radical habits, but it was a good match, but you do, however, see radical habits that are a bit stronger than that benchmark. Is the good news is now the organization is informed beforehand to say, now we know what to expect. So they're not going to be surprised. Let's say I'm the candidate and I have a very high habit on responsiveness. So I'm expecting feedback immediately on everything that happened. You see that in my graph. Maybe the responsiveness in the benchmark is a bit more relaxed, but you know this about the candidate. Now you know that communicating deadlines, communicating with me, I want that immediacy. I want that, so you know, give me that information. So it's not a situation of us bumping heads and first having to find feet and to say, but why is this individual so impatient? Why, you know, that can be the experience of the environment. Now they know, oh, great, she's responsive, she wants the information, so let's make sure we get that information. So the beauty is you're informed, you know what's going to happen. That's there. Because remember, a radical habit can be the best habit for that environment, or it can be dysfunctional if there isn't room for that habit. The problem isn't the radical habit. The problem, or the fact of the matter is, how is that aligning to the context? For the individual, what can be their expectation? If I'm coming in with radical habits, if the environment allows it, so in other words, the benchmark does cater for this, fantastic, because I'm going to be energized. I'm going to have that experience of flow because my brain is allowed to actually do the patterns that it's wired to. Those habits that are so strong and embedded, let's say innovation, I get to innovate the whole time, and I love to innovate. It's that embedded pattern that my brain knows exactly how to do. So for me, it's yes, I finally found the fit where I can do what I want to do. The opposite scenario, let's say the environment doesn't cater for my radical habit, is now I'm going to feel boxed in because I'm coming in with that same strong pattern and I want to put the innovative ideas on the table, if we're using innovation as an example. And now the whole time I'm getting a no, the whole time I'm saying, sorry, you're junior, sorry, this isn't your responsibility, no, 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 we'll make the decisions higher up. So what is my experience is I'm feeling boxed in and I don't like the environment. It's not sustainable for me because I say I'm frustrated, I don't get to innovate. So do you see now, that's just a scenario if it doesn't cater for that. So just make sure you see the whole context to know, okay, do we know what to expect of the environment? Do we know of the individual? So if it's informed of the data, lovely, you see the entire picture. But let's say you just have the individual's result, you don't have a benchmark or anything, then you just know how to manage the radical habit for the individual and for the manager, because you know that radical habit needs that space to live. So give it that space to live. If that's possible, fantastic. If it's not possible, then how do we address that? How do we make sure it's managed optimally? Lizette, anything you want to add to the radical habit conversation there?
Thanks, Susanina. I think you explained it very well. I think maybe just a comment, not specifically linked to the radical habits, but what we've also seen in the past is that people think that if they have a benchmark and they are recruiting and they get a candidate with habits that are higher than the benchmark, that's a good choice. Definitely not. You want a match. And I think Susanne explained it very nicely with regards to what is necessary for the context. Be careful. If you have candidates and they match, it's better to take a candidate whose habits are maybe slightly softer than the benchmark than stronger than the benchmark. Higher habits than the benchmark is not a better candidate. It's actually the opposite, because that's exactly linking to your question, Rieta. People with stronger habits than what is needed for the context, they can easily become destructive, or they become bored and then they become destructive, or they normally perform quite well. And I'm referring to an individual with habits stronger than the benchmark, especially if it's not a match. People sometimes look at it and say, I'm just going to ignore the Shadowmatch recommendation. This person's got much stronger habits. I think they're going to be excellent. And we've got many case studies where companies have employed that individual, and at first they perform very well because it's a new broom. But the moment the environment starts to stifle their innovation or put a lid on their energy and their propensity to take ownership or their propensity to solve problems, they become destructive, and very often they just resign for no reason, because they are not in a context where their strong patterns can flourish. So it's important that you find the best match to the benchmark. And that's back to what Susanne said. That's why the benchmark is so important, that you really put your top performers, people that are really good in the environment, in your benchmark, because they show you what is the context. And then your matches, then you can 100% trust the Shadowmatch score on the match of an individual. Thanks, Susanne.
Thank you, Zed. Rieta, any follow-up question there, or something you want to add?
Yeah, just a very quick one. If anybody else wants to ask a question on the teams, if you take some individuals and what's the word again? But say just hide them,
Exclude.
the-
Yeah.
exclude them. Yes, the shadow, the team average, the shadow on the spider graph, does that change or that stays the same for the whole team?
Yeah, so that changed. That's a great question. Let me show you that live. Then you can see it in practice, because I know there's going to be a nice example here. That's the whole thing about the working with the data and linking it to what's happening in real life. Just
Yeah.
as much impact as my habits have as me walking into the boardroom and being part of the conversation, so my habits influence the graph that is there, because I'm a next individual contributing to the collective of the team. And the nice thing is, it's not valuing rank. So it's not saying, oh, but you're the manager, so you need to have 2 seats or whatever. It's everybody gets equal, everybody has habits, equal team members. So in this team, and it also might answer the previous question that you have, is I think it's more Sophia. Okay, so this is an individual with radical habits. So let's say I didn't know this about the individual and I'm bringing her into the team, and I brought her into the management position. And these are a few of my happy individuals in the team, Michelle and Jeff and Jennifer. They've been in the team for 5 years, love the team, very nice dynamic, smooth sailing, perfect job. Suddenly Sharon becomes the manager. Now all 3 of them want to quit, because this is where they are now being operated on or managed on. The efficiency should be there, the accuracy should be there. So they said, my life is horrible since my manager joined, because now everything needs to happen yesterday and so now I can see, but is the radical habit the fit? Just another scenario on that. Let's say the team there was no energy. We were fatigued. It was a non-performing team. That same graph, those 3 individuals, we didn't have anything to get us out of that rut. We need a new manager to take us to the next level. then that's the perfect manager, because she's going to lift us up and say, come on, guys, let's get that efficiency on. So you see, it's the radical habits aren't the issue. The issue is, what is the impact of the radical habit on that team? And we're informed. So now we're not going to be surprised if they say, oh, I'm a bit uncomfortable with this new pace, but they're on board because that's what they wanted, or it's needed for the performance to happen. So it's not a blind side where we say, oh, my life was great up until that individual happened. Okay, but now to answer your actual question that you had about the team is, just let's take a quick look at that profile there. Do you see this is where we are? If I now take that one individual out of the team, exclude, put on standby. Okay, I don't know if you can see that specifically, but it shifted a bit on some of the aspects. That quick and efficiency and the detail dropped a bit. And then what I definitely can know is in the subgroups, I know that individual is, for instance, the action and task individual in that team. She's the adventure and change. She's the problem solver, because it's those dynamic habits. So now that's changed. That is, and what's happened is your anchor team has shifted, because now that's taken away. So different individuals sort of feel comfortable what the team is. Let's say we bring 4 Sophias in, 4 individuals with that graph. Then your anchor group is going to shift again. So it's dynamic to say each individual put in, put out. And you'll see it's interesting if I were to grab, let's say, some of the individuals with the softer habits. Let's say, who's that? Dawn and Sharon and Stacy. Let's just grab them. Then you can see Sharon and Stacy. Oh, Tracy, not Stacy. Oh, great. And exclude. You see what now happened is the alignment of the team. Do you see how we shifted to the people preference here? That's a lot stronger. So a lot of the dynamics changed. And if you're going to go to the subgroup, this has completely changed. Different individuals in the subgroup, different individuals there, because now we've shifted that. So yeah, so this is maybe, now it was 3 results, but every individual who changed everything there. And interestingly enough, the further the habits are from the context, the collective of the graph, the bigger the impact will be. So let's say I'm an individual with very soft habits and you're taking that out, it's a bigger impact, or a very high, you can more easily see that visually, because it's shifting that a bit, versus if I was closer to the team, and I'm fitting in more into the context of the team, but each still carries the same weight. We're all contributing equally to what that gray graph is going to be. Okay. Well, makes sense.
The softer habits and bolder habits can also affect,
Yes,
and
yes.
team strength can also be affected in that.
Team strength can be affected, soft and bold, definitely. Just want to highlight that, because we have other individuals on the screen, and that's something that's so important, is the bold and the soft habits for a team are the 5 strongest habits that the team share collectively, and the 5 softest habits that the team share collectively. That is dynamic for each team. So it would be different. So for this team, the current team members we have there, the bold behaviors are discipline, conflict handling, and the ones you see on the screen. So these are individuals that contributed to that. The moment I include someone else, other team members at the bottom, this is going to change, as well as the bold behaviors. Because remember, what's now happening is the system needs to find the new graph to say, out of all of the habits, where are the highest habits spiking for all of the individuals? And now there's new data that informs it, especially if I bring in Sophia. No, she's pulling it maybe to the responsiveness side. That suddenly jumps as a higher habit, where now it might be a softer habit. So yeah, it would definitely change that, as well as the soft behaviors, because these are dynamic aspects dependent on the team members. And that's also what's nice, is if you start playing around with that to see, okay, but what happens? And you can then role play scenarios to say, this team going on a breakaway for 2 weeks, but Suzanne isn't going with. What is the dynamics then? This team going on project B, but Suzanne is going with. What is the dynamics then? Who should we put together in subgroups? So that's easy, just linking the data back and forth by excluding and excluding in the calculations. Okay, thanks. Arieta, great questions. Thanks for contributing there. Okay, any other questions? Something else someone wants to ask? Or it doesn't have to be on today's content, anything on the system? Happy, good. Great. Okay. Thank you so much for joining in. We really value your time. Remember, you are more than welcome to send through any requests for content that you want to see us showcase in a session like this. So we base it on questions we receive or things that happen in real life with clients or things we know are important and maybe the individuals aren't aware, or the system users aren't aware of. But if there's something specifically you want to say, please put the spotlight on this, just pop us an email to info@Shadowmatch, and then we can make sure we prepare that content. But yeah, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time. And yeah, go well. Thanks.